Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about Pluto's retrograde in the sign of Aquarius, which will start on May 6th and it will have its continuity until October 15th. So we're talking about 5 months of this saga. And let's start here. If you pay attention from the time when Pluto entered into the sign of Aquarius, you'll notice that something's been changing, shifting. And it's not so much about what you're doing, but how you're positioned inside of the things that you do. Pluto has been creating this quiet awareness, especially in the way that we're relating to other people, as well as to systems, the way that we feel committed to others. We're starting to see these relational dynamics are not neutral. A lot of them require power dynamics, and these dynamics have been shaping us. And up to this point, we might not have been able to name it, but we're really distinctly feeling it. We're thinking about it. It's coming to the surface. We're starting to question the weight of things and how much it's taking from us to remain in certain dynamics. And because we're getting to see it, it's kind of hard to be a participant the way that we've always been. And this is the revelation that Pluto's trying to bring to the forefront in the next 5 months. And we're going to get deep into different psychological components, how it's getting to the depth of our subconscious, and what it's trying to show us. But before getting there, I want to let you know that the next video is going to be about that sextile with Sun in the sign of Taurus and Jupiter in the sign of Cancer. And thank God for that. No more squares to Jupiter. We're getting a cooperative aspect. And if you want to catch that video and a lot more, please do remember to subscribe. Press that notification bell, the little cutie pie, so that YouTube notifies you when those videos are released. And we're going to go through the first layer of the video, which is about looking at the sign of Aquarius. It's really important to understand this. It's one of the most misunderstood signs. The nature of the sign creates misunderstanding, but the fact that modern astrology has designated Uranus as the ruler of the sign has created further confusion about what this sign does. And I often see the 11th house significations are also mixed up with this sign. So I want to take a moment to just talk about this sign, because this is the environment Pluto's in. And the first thing we have to remember, Aquarius is Saturn's sign. It's a Saturn-ruled sign. So it's going to have some qualities of Saturn. And one of the things that we have to remember, Saturn is about common people, everyday people, the working class people. We're talking about the 99th percentile. And this part of Saturn is the primary quality that's expressed in the sign of Aquarius. And this is one of the reasons why Aquarius is related to the collectives. It's actually a sign where it has the ability to lower itself and humble itself, to be able to participate in something much larger than itself. The collective, the greater good is the objective. So let's say you have Aquarius in your ascendant, or you have the sun here. It's telling us something about the way it organizes our identity towards service. This is a very loyal sign because of its fixed nature. And because it's of the air element, it is related to the intellect. So it's very much idea-oriented, but about group ideas, not individualistic ideas. So this sign always prioritizes group belonging. And the group always oversees individual needs. And the humility that comes out of this sign is because it has a willingness to take the position of the other. It's not centered on personal needs, me, I. It doesn't have a need for dominance. It wants group cooperation. It doesn't understand vertical power. It wants horizontal power. It's looking for equal power relations. Like if we could say that this sign would ask a question based on its own identity, it's going to ask, what can I give myself to? Not what can I take for myself? And it also wants to do this in a very practical, everyday way. This is Saturn's sign. So we're not talking about theory. We're talking about how to practically be engaged in the concerns of others to make oneself of service. This sign can also ask, I want to be loyal to something. What can I be showing my loyalty to? What cause? How do I serve this cause? And because this sign is of the fixed elements, and because we do have an individual self, and this sign can come to sacrifice itself for others, it will always arrive to this question of, what am I being loyal to? What am I serving? Why am I serving this? Why do I do this? These become the conundrum of this sign. Because just wanting to do better for the greater good, it doesn't mean the greater good is always good to the person. And this is exactly where Pluto is going to start doing its work. So let's just briefly now look at Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. We're just layering everything so that we understand why we're going to make that psychological interpretation towards the end of the video. And what I want us to remember about Pluto in general, this is a planet that has a lot of depth, but it's a kind of depth that's leaning towards darkness. In some mythologies, this is the god that's related to the underworld. This planet also talks about pressure, force, and power. And it also operates through creating compulsion. It taps into our instincts, to our raw drives, and there's an intensity for us to express our power. And this planet also has an aim to transform things. Like if you think about the god of the underworld, the god of death, we're talking about the transformation and that transition from life to death and then from death back into life. So when we consider the significations of Pluto, this is a very powerful planet. But I want you to realize this. No planet has enough power to go into a sign and change the nature of that sign. It can't change the environment and the ecosystem of that sign. In fact, the sign hands over the planet a script and says, this is what I'm about. That's what you're about. You're going to deal with this kind of an environment. So even Pluto can't come in here and change the nature of Aquarius. So it's just going to be dealing with the things that I just talked about the nature of Aquarius. So Pluto is not going to remove the service orientation of Aquarius, but what Pluto can do is to change the nature of service itself. Pluto is going to be like, all right, you want to be about service? Fine, but I need you to understand the power dynamics underneath this. It wants to show us when we give ourselves to something, it's never neutral. It always has a direction. And that there's a hierarchical component in that power dynamic and we fit somewhere within it. So let's just keep that in mind about Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. And let's just go into the context of this retrograde of Pluto. So when a planet goes retrograde, from our perspective on Earth, is going backwards. And I said earlier, Pluto has to do about depth. So this backwardness of it is going deeper into something. And what Pluto wants to do in Aquarius is to show us what the status quo is and how we've engaged with it, how we've been participating in certain dynamics, collective dynamics in particular. And as I mentioned at the earlier part of the video, Pluto is going to be doing this from May 6th until October 15th. So for these 5 months, we're entering Pluto's underworld. And I don't want us to fear this. We should just look at this planet, this retrograde phase, this next 5 months, as certain experiences that is going to deepen our understanding of how we stand in relation to other people, what we give of ourselves, and what we expect in return. This is very important to understand in life, so we should take this as an opportunity. We're meant to see the deep undercurrent of our ways, as well as other people's. I'm going to be talking in this video in terms of how we can be aware, what we ourselves can do, but I want you to be aware this could also be happening to people around you where you are mixed in it and you're experiencing it in terms of their actions. And so much of this is going to be on a subconscious level because we're talking about Pluto. We're supposed to take these 5 months to understand what it is that drives us, that drives our participation, our collaboration and cooperation with other people. We need to understand why we stay in certain situations. Why do we return back when things are even over? There's that sense of loyalty that I need to go back. I need to be of service. Why? Why do we have these certain obligations that fix us to a certain situation and to certain people? Pluto wants us to understand these dynamics. It's going to dissolve the surface, go beyond our surface conscious understanding to see the drives beneath them. In some ways, Pluto is taking us inside our own underworld. It wants us to understand how we're positioned within ourselves and relative to others. It wants us to see how we're entangled so deeply in different kinds of power structures and how we come to negotiate with it. So now let's get to that psychological aspect of what we can expect. What kind of experience is Pluto denoting? So as I mentioned earlier, Aquarius carries the posture of lowering itself. It wants to serve, it wants to be of service, and it wants to be connected to something larger than itself. Pluto, on the other hand, carries our instinct for survival and to control ourselves and other people through extraordinary amount of power exertion. So right off the bat, we know that Pluto in Aquarius is going to create contradictions. And what Pluto wants to show us personally is our own inner paradoxes. It wants to show us the parts of ourselves that submits, and yet this part is not separate from that part of us that also seeks power simultaneously. And when you think about the concept of submission in general, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like for any of you guys who've been in problematic families where there are power dynamics, control issues, dealing with a lot of uncooperative people, you've become good at reading people. You know how to instantly adjust yourself to create instant alignment with other people. Because if you're not aligned to them, you will be punished. Like in those circumstances, we know that compliance is needed for survival. And to feel an ounce of stability, we have to make sure that we stay in a particular position within the hierarchy of that family. So Pluto wants to go in and it wants to show us where this originates from. It wants us to understand why we do certain things and why we adjust ourselves and why we need the sense of inclusion in this, let's say, very toxic environment. Sure, as a child, you needed it because that was a survival instinct, but now as an adult, why are you still doing it? Pluto wants to show us this. This could be in the work environment, in our communities. Pluto's asking, why do you need to serve in this way? And why have you attached how you are valuable as a human being to this term and condition of subserviency? And Pluto wants to show us that this kind of behavior always has a cost. This is one of the first things that it wants to show us. And because Pluto has to do about expression of power, a lot of this cost is related to that in terms of what we're giving up, in terms of our own personal power, our potential, and what it is that we can express to just be loyal and be of service and cooperative in a certain dynamic that might not be good for us. It wants us to understand the cost of giving up that power and that potentiality. And this is so important to understand what it means to go from survival instinct to that instinct that wants to thrive and wants to live, to go from the death drive to the libido and the life drive. And Pluto wants to show us, you know what, you can suppress and repress your power and your potentiality, but it never disappears from you. It's just being pushed down, repressed and suppressed, and it's just organizing itself in another way in your subconscious. So Pluto wants to show us how this suppressed and repressed power has reorganized itself and what the pressure of this repression has been doing to us, even more than what other people have been doing to us. But what is it that now we're doing to ourselves by not being able to see this part of ourselves, and we continue to act and behave in that way? Because you see this. As the years go by, you get into different friendships, relationships, and it's just a repeat of what our parents did, what was in our upbringing. We even find people who have their qualities and attributes. Sometimes we feel a sense of loyalty to the most toxic person. And when you actually kind of go into a non-judgmental state and you watch that other person, they're repeating exactly where they came from too. This is the blessing of Pluto. It's going to take us to some very dark places to see some very dark things, because this is the only way to deal with it and to be able to bring that transformation that Pluto's about. So in some ways, Pluto is showing us the way that we've split, how there's an internal division, one that's seeking power and the other one that's doing the submission, and they're both happening simultaneously. So externally is a split, and we split the world into good and bad, but subconsciously, there are drives that are just fighting against each other for dominance. So on a conscious level, we might be saying, I have to serve, I have to stay, I have to remain loyal, I have to stay connected to this group of people. And simultaneously, we'll find that there is that drive in us that wants to express our power. We do want to assert. We want to direct the situation. We want to have control over our own position, and we want to be an expression of our full potential. And externally, we can negate one to be able to operate in another realm. So you repress your power to be able to stay with these groups of people, and you're in a state of subserviency, but underneath, they're not canceling each other out. In some ways, externally, we're bound and trapped, and internally, we're bound and trapped. In neither of these spaces, we're able to move freely. And Pluto's going to press on this very sore spot externally and internally for 5 months. It's like having a bruise, and Pluto's just keeps squeezing that same spot. So it's going to show us how we are so subservient and unfree externally, and how we have developed these internal mechanisms to be able to deal with this subserviency and the way that we've suppressed and repressed our power. So it can feel painful in both places. And I want you to know, once when you start reflecting and you go more on the internal aspect of things to understand how you're dealing with all of this subconsciously, one of the most prominent things that's going to come out is this feeling of resentment, like deep feelings of resentment. And I want us to know resentment, if we pay attention, it's always related to suppression, repression, and oppression. And the resentment is about knowing that we are of a higher potential, that we do have power, but we cannot express it. So resentment is an emotional consequence, which is about holding back our power and our potential while we're continually submitting externally, just going along with things externally. This is us knowing on some level, like these people that I hang around with, these people who have a say in my life, they're determining what my life is about. They're limiting me as a human being. And yet we end up staying. Because a lot of times we're free to walk away from a lot of things, but we just end up staying. And Pluto's showing us in this moment, like this pressure can't be distributed anywhere, not internally and not externally. And the crazy thing about resentment is, even though we're resenting the other person because we're blaming them in terms of, I cannot express my power, when we pay attention to the resentment itself, there's so much self-judgment there. It's like internally, we're just being compressed. There's like this simultaneous rejection of the thing that we resent, but we're also rejecting ourselves for having to constantly, the way that we come back, we remain loyal and we stay. Like this is a motif actually, people who are in a state of subserviency, people who serve other people. There's this, yes, they're subservient to them, but at the same time, they reject the person that they serve because they know that the power dynamics there are not equitable, are not healthy. It's a master-slave kind of a dynamic. So in essence, Pluto wants to show us that we are living in some sort of a volatile system. And, you know, the appearance of it is the system has control over us, and it could be family system, some organization you belong to, society in general, but we're also holding ourselves back in this system. And underneath this, it's like a ticking time bomb just sitting there to go off at any minute. And, you know, going back to resentment, one of the crazy things is that we feel it, and it's a very strong feeling, but we often don't express it outwardly either, because that could like be steam out of the pressure cooker. But no, resentment has a really strange way of self-expression because all of its actions are very covert. Like you see this in relationships, right? Like the couple are together, they actually resent each other, and just passing, I don't know, a bottle of water is not just passing a bottle of water. It has all these underlying meanings and messages that are being conveyed through this act. Everything that you say has another intentionality in it. Like we'll comply without being present. We agree, but underneath it is actually disagreement. And I want you to think about what that act is. That is that part of ourselves that wants to have the power, that wants to have control. In some ways, we're actually becoming more controlling. We become hyper-vigilant. Like there's a subversiveness to it. Or we might be observing this in people that are around us. So in everything that we do, it's a small gesture of control. We're just covertly trying to influence other people because we can't have a healthy, open expression of our power. So in other words, we're still trying to shape outcomes, but from behind the position of subserviency. And this is a really complex thing that we human beings do because on the surface, we're being obedient. But underneath that pressure cooker, there's actually rebellion. It's like a freaking guerrilla warfare. And that's what I was trying to say at the beginning of the video. There's power even in the act of submission, because the potential that we are has an inherent kind of power that's been invested within us. And we can't get rid of it. We can't give it to other people. It's always there. In this case, we just have pushed it down. We've silenced it, and it's become some sort of a monster internally through all this negative emotion towards other people, feelings of rejection, feelings of inadequacy, resentments. And as we'll see in a minute, it turns into manipulation. Even when we are in a state of subserviency, we have to realize we're trying to control the world around us, but in a subversive way. And that is what the shadow is, shadow of power. And it's a shadow because the self needs to express this in a healthy way. It needs to be engaged with the other, cooperate with other, become something innovative, which the sign of Aquarius can because of that air element. It has a lot of intelligence, but without contracting its power to other people. It has to negotiate with power, not give it away. The shadow is when we're trying to express that power indirectly. And because the shadow is here, what this means, the way that we're operating in the external world is through constant and perpetual manipulation, whether if this is something that we're doing or the people that we're now engaged with around us, and this is how they're operating. And because this is the shadow part of us or other people, in general, we are completely oblivious and ignorant to our shadows and how they operate. We see it as normal, the things that we do. Like this kind of manipulation is not intentional deception. This is the intelligence of that shadow aspect of ourselves. It comes out feeling very natural. But again, going back to this manipulation, again, it's going back to the fact that we can't assert ourselves productively and in a healthy way, and we have to do it in a covert way. And even this manipulation is a way of allowing that inherent power within to come out and express itself, even though it's been suppressed and repressed. It's just going to find another route to come out and express itself, which is through the shadow. And if you find yourself in a work environment or in dynamic with other people where there is unequal distribution of power, this becomes even more prominent. And I think one of the distinctions that Pluto is trying to show us right now, what it means to have true and authentic authority rather than control that you use as leverage to have authority. And I think the objective of Pluto in general, and in this case, in the sign of Aquarius, is always to show us that inherent power within and the drive to practice, to exert, and to embody that power. And it wants to show us that if we don't know how to wield this externally in a healthy way, it's going to seep out and it's going to come out in very absurd, toxic, crazy ways. And it's also going to massively damage us, our relationship, our sense of self, all those self-judgments that come. The kind of experience that we have of ourselves becomes very dark. So this transit's revealing to us where submission has been a necessary thing to do. It might have been related to our survival in the earlier part of life. It's going to show us where power has been redirected rather than expressed. It wants us to see how resentment and manipulation has formed as a response and what that has done to us. And Pluto wants us to really feel what it's going to be like to remain in the status quo, what it means to remain in these dynamics that are on equal power relations and that are absolutely toxic. And the toxicity of it, you can feel it, not based on what other people do, but based on your own reactions of, let's say, that feeling of resentment and contempt, which are the two worst feelings a human being can have, because they have a tendency to just linger and stay and just eat away at us. Pluto wants us to know what it means to have power, that we do not have to contract it out. And it wants us to see what it means to authentically and genuinely participate and be of service. What healthy loyalty looks like versus the kinds of things that we have come to call loyalty. And again, we have to remember, this is not a planet that just wants to reveal. It's not a planet that just wants to make us feel. Even Saturn, it just wants us to feel because we're paying our karma, our past due debt, if I can phrase it that way, because we're speaking the language of astrology. But Pluto wants transformation. And this is why the cycles are so friggin' long, because we need the time to be able to transform these things. We have to transmute it, digest it. But in these initial degrees of Aquarius, these are all revelations of showing us how we're connected externally and what that has meant for us internally. And right now in this retrograde phase is all about revelation and showing us, taking us to the underworld, into that darkness, lighting it up with a match just enough so that we get to see what's there. How we're going to work it out externally and what the process of integration looks like, that's going to come after it's retrograde, when it's in direct phase again. And some of the things I want us to pay attention to during this retrograde phase I want you to take note of where you feel you have a sense of obligation. The obligation feels glitchy to you, but you feel obliged to stay. Or pay attention to how your sense of self starts to diminish around some people. And you have to diminish yourself in order just to be around them. You have to break down for them to accept you. You have to accept these crazy roles in order to remain in their life. Pay attention to those feelings of resentment when they bubble to the surface. We have to catch ourselves when we're trying to manipulate things, say things silently, convey something beyond what we're actually doing and saying, instead of just saying it out loud. Assertively saying, this is where I am, this is what I'm about, this is what I need, this is where I'm going. It's just all of it is being twisted and turned. Also, take note of self-judgment, not just rejection of the other, but rejection of the self. And I want us to take note the purpose of this, which is to have integrity. Pluto is showing us where we do not have a sense of integrity right now, where things are not dignified. This is a journey to dignity. It's about living a dignified life, whether if it's within our social dynamics in our individual lives or what it means to be a human being with dignity in society. Like on a collective level, I'm focusing on this very much on the individual level. But when we think about how people in absolute poverty live and how the 1% live, this is not acceptable. This is something that Pluto is bringing to the forefront. All lives have value. To have basic nourishment, for example, is a basic fundamental of life and is part of living a life with dignity. And these kinds of things can come down to our individual dynamics too, the way that we're individually connected to certain collectives. And when this is all said and done, we're supposed to understand the essence of loyalty and service, which are two very, very beautiful qualities. And in essence, to be loyal and to be of service to other people is an expression of one's power. This is what Pluto wants to show us. We don't serve others from a place of subserviency, but we serve because we have this fullness that we can contribute to others. That's an expression of our power. We remain loyal because there's self-trust. That's an expression of power. Pluto's showing us we do not need to break down for the greater goods, because if one person have to break down for the greater good, it's showing that what we're dealing with is not good. And to break down is to render the world broken. That is actually a sure way to corrupt the worlds. What we actually need to do is to understand what is a healthy expression of our power. And so much so that we can be in a collective and we can actually express that without reducing one person to be able to accentuate another person. This does not have to be a zero-sum game. This is what Pluto is trying to show us. And this is just one of its many phases until it's out of this sign. And we're getting to the end of this video. And before closing, please do remember to like, share, and subscribe. And please do comment. These are complicated transits. We're talking about that realm of the subconscious that is often hidden from us. And it's a gift to have it revealed so that we can grapple with it, wrestle with it, and to set ourselves free. And I'd love to know how you're working with this, what's coming up for you. What is a healthy expression of your power? Where do you feel that you had to repress and suppress this power? And then how is it seeping out in other strange ways like self-judgment, self-rejection, rejection of other people? How do you feel a healthy sense of belonging within communities, collectives, with other people? I'd love to know, and this is a great way for us to learn from each other and to also know that we're not alone in this. Super important. And if you want a reading of this transit, or just to understand your own personal birth charts, to understand why you have gone through the things that you've gone through, why you had certain experiences, and where it's all leading to, you can go to my website for more information at parisayazdi.com, or you can go to the description box below. My email's there if you want to contact me directly. And now to close this video. The ultimate lesson here that Pluto's going to impart through its entire cycle in this sign is for us to know what our power is and how to exist within different power structures, how to exist in power in itself, what power means. Because if you think about it, power isn't something that you just have or don't have. It's something that we're all made of. We have all been invested with certain kind of power, and we're all always participating in it, internally and externally. We're participating in it in every agreement that we make. And from the moment that you wake up till the moment that you go to bed, you're either making agreements with yourselves, with the environment, or with other people. We're participating in it in every role that we've taken on, every position that we find ourselves in. Power is in every moment that we make a choice. And that choice can be a choice of staying or leaving, delaying, complying, influencing. Power is present at all times. In fact, we're shaping reality through power, as reality has its own power and it comes to also influence and shape us. So this transit wants us to see how we navigate power, how we practice it. And it wants to show us that none of this is accidental. It wants to show us the developmental process of power, how we have adapted certain things to survive, how we have fought against it to survive, how we employ it to belong, how we use it every day to remain connected to different facets of our lives. But Pluto wants us to see that survival is not the same thing as thriving. So Pluto's going to be constantly asking us in the sign of Aquarius, where do you have power? It wants to know what we've been doing with our power. It wants us to even recognize how we have power in places that we think we do not have it. And once when we can see what power is, the essence of power, how we are all a site of it, power comes to be something that we stop reacting to. It becomes something that we are responsible for. And you know what? If we can see that and we become non-reactive to other people's supposed position of power or the power that we have, we actually stabilize that field of power. We have equitable power. We have the kind of power that can negotiate with other sites of power. And to be responsible for one's power, to show that responsibility in life is one of our greatest tests in this life. And this test is occurring all the time because there's different power relations in every environment that you go to. And to know how you are responsible for the power that you have in that moment is supremely important. And before closing, my wish for us is this. May we recognize the power we already hold, especially in the places that we've learned to suppress it, repress it, or just contract it out to other people. And may we begin to stand in our power clearly, directly, and without negotiating ourselves out of it. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.